Hello everyone and welcome back to the Stormblood Dungeon Lore series. In these videos I'll do my best to explain the lore behind each dungeon of Final Fantasy XIV and go over some things about them that you might not know. Today's dungeon is the Burn. During the Third Astral Era, many nations were still in their fledgling eras, and a majority of these had, since the Calamity of Fire in the Second Astral Era, lost faith in their chosen deities thanks to the great holy wars fought between religions, as well as the subsequent extreme famine and drought caused by the calamity. With nowhere else to turn, many communities decided to begin focusing on the growth of the individual, eventually sparking a new era of technological and magical advancement. The fervour for such discoveries was no greater than Nzande, an ambitious man that would go on to unite the groups that were keen in advancing their practices yet further, and his followers would eventually find a way to combine magic and technology, resulting in the founding of etherochemistry. This sped up scientific discoveries greatly, and led to the founding of the Allegan Empire in turn. From there, Zunde spread their nation far and wide, even reaching the bounds of the Far East, a place to the west of Doma now known as the Burn. Although once known to be a lush, verdant land ripe with ether, it now stands empty and barren, with pure white sands and rock almost completely drained of the ether within. Although the land was inhabited by Allag for a time, this piece of history seems lost to time. The current belief for most is that which follows the word of Solus Galvus, first Emperor of Garlemald. It is said that once he began looking to expand, as the Allegans once had, he came across the barren wasteland of the Burn. His belief was that a land so dry of ether must have been the devastation caused by the over-reliance upon primals, and that their summoning in excess caused the region to be warped and ruined over wars fought between deities. This is what led him and his nation to follow the creed that primals are a threat to the very existence of the star, resulting in the Garlemald we know today. Now just a small warning before this next part, as the last two dungeons are both optional, there's a lot of missing context for the Burn if I don't cover it here, so I'll try and summarise current events from where they left off after Hell's Lid. Skip to this part in the video if you just want to see where the Burn comes in. Since their diversion with Soroban into Hell's Lid, the Warrior of Light continued assisting their Doman allies in Yangsha, Gisetsu bringing the apparent amnesiac Yotsuyu before Hien, who decides to keep her hidden from sight for a time. After speaking with Jafuya, discovering he partially bore the blame for keeping Yotsuyu in a dire line of work, he returned to Hien to discover that an Imperial airship was sighted over Doman soil. Heading out to meet the ship, an emissary of the Populares of Garlemald, Asahi Sas Brutus, comes forth eagerly. Yugiri recognizes him as Yotsuyu's brother, and Hien agrees to speak of terms to help foster peace between the two nations. Asahi, although open to discussion, seems insistent on the prevention of primals across the Far East, requesting the policing of the Kojin. After more discussion, Asahi puts forth the idea of a prisoner exchange, requesting Yotsuyu's freedom in exchange for many of the Doman subjects captured by Garlemald during their occupation. While Hien deliberates, the Warrior of Light is requested by Asahi for a tour of his forgotten homeland, showing him Monzon and Doma Castle in turn. After taking a boat and landing on the opposite shore, a cry rings out and Asahi springs into action, defending Issei and his army, surrounded by the Kojin of the Red. After a short battle we drive them off, allowing the rescue pair to return to Namai. In the Doman Enclave, Hien visits Gisetsu and Yotsuyu, at first deciding to follow through on cutting her down, but the former is convinced by Gisetsu to stay his blade. Following this, Asahi returns and begins discussion of the prisoner exchange. Hien agrees to release Yotsuyu in exchange for the missing Domans, but only should her memory return before the appointed hour, otherwise she would remain in Doma as a vulnerable citizen. Asahi agrees as a show of courtesy, but requests a few minutes with his sister, which he is granted. Following this, we escort him and his entourage back to the shore of Castrum Fluminus, and as we have a private word with the ambassador, he undergoes an alarming change. Swearing vengeance against the savages, the Warrior of Light experiences a vision of Asahi fighting the Doman liberation troops, at first being overwhelmed but then saved by Xenos, who defeats the entire squad single-handed. After this, the Garlean group leave Doma until the appointed hour for the prisoner exchange. Asahi, upon his ship, recalls his interaction with Yotsuyu from earlier, in which he gives her a curious mirror to help her remember herself. For now though, the group keeps an eye on Yotsuyu, eventually regarding her amnesia as the truth. Worryingly, however, she disappears after a conversation with Gisetsu, prompting the group to search Yangsha for her. We eventually find her in Namai, surrounded by its citizens who recognize her as the terrible Viceroy. although she herself is confused over the hostility. We then lead Yotsuyu to Fluminense for the exchange, with Hien showing Asahi that she still lacks her memories. Asahi, however, pulls a cruel trick, bringing forth Yotsuyu's hated parents, triggering a definite response in her. It seems not enough to bring back her memories, however, and the exchange continues as planned. That night in the Doma Enclave, the Warrior of Light searches for Yotsuyu, and she seems to have wandered again, and we find her parents lying upon the path. Her mother seems dead, while her father is alive but heavily wounded. Another vision shows us an altercation between Yotsuyu and her parents, and how they treated her just as badly as before, resulting in Yotsuyu stabbing both of them and returning to her normal self. Asahi then appears, promising power, and takes her away. Due to the nature of Asahi's attitude and the now taken Yotsuyu, Hien and the group put plans into action to evacuate the held Domans should an underhanded scheme move into action. We request a large ship from the Confederacy, where Yugiri infiltrates the castrum to plot an unobstructed exit. After this, we finally accompany the group to Castrum Fluminense to oversee the exchange, taking a boat from the nearby shore. Asahi seems excited, we now know untruthfully, about the bridges of peace being built between the two nations, but Hien questions the large boxes stored near to them, which we saw earlier just outside the castrum. Asahi, however, insists they are full of supplies, and Hien goes on to mention Yotsuyu's sudden deliverance into the Garlean's arms. At that moment, Yotsuyu, now returned to her Viceroy self, stands atop the nearby platform with her old dress and pipe, even acting once more as though she still rules Doma. Although Hien dismisses her claim, Yotsuyu scoffs and claims her rule to be the will of Xenos himself. After claiming her reign, she holds up the mirror given by Asahi, claiming she will rule coldly and distantly as the full moon. At these words, the crates spring open, revealing them to be filled with crystals. Ether gathers to her mirror, raising her from the floor and transforming her into Tsukiyomi, Queen of the Moon. Asahi declares a violation of the agreement, as a Doman has summoned a primal, and leaves quickly with his guard. Hien, Alphino, and Yugiri all agree to leave the threat to the Warrior of Light, and rush to gather their comrades before leaving. The Warrior of Light meanwhile tackles Tsukiyomi, in which Yotsuyu continues to have visions of her parents and brother, as well as Gesetsu, which shocks her. After felling her, Asahi returns and shoots his sister, mocking us for not finishing the job. After again mocking us for being unable to act against an emissary, he begins kicking and spouting insults at Yotsuyu. However, Yotsuyu is still alive, and impales him on both of her swords, smiling as she claims her vengeance against the one she first swore to kill. Asahi's blood drips onto her extended hand, and she finally fades as she throws Asahi from her. Afterwards, we see another vision involving Asahi, and shockingly, Xenos Yegalvis, who gives him the order to sue for peace in Doma, and provides the entire plan leading up to the primal summoning. Alarmingly, this means Xenos must have given instruction after our fight with him in Alamigo. At the moment, however, we return to the platform and watch as Asahi swears vengeance, fading away himself soon after. After a discussion with Maxima, Asahi's second in command, about Xenos' whereabouts, Alphino makes a bold decision to visit Garlemald as an emissary of Doma. In the Doma Enclave, the citizens are reunited with those lost to Garlemald during the invasion, and Gesetsu makes his own decision to leave for his own travels, hoping to offer repose for those who left this world in suffering. Alize and the Warrior of Light return to Girabanya afterwards to investigate the apparently missing body of Xenos with Lys and Thancred, and after checking the unmarked grave and the locks, they do in fact find it missing. We return to the Rising Stones to regroup, and Alize seems worried about Alphino after a worrying option suggests that Xenos' body may be currently inhabited by an Ascian. In the Garlean Palace, we see Varus and Xenos discussing the primal in Doma, and in Castrum Urbania an unknown soldier tinkering with Garlean machines to the dismay of one of his comrades, who the former strikes dead with a katana and speaks in a sinisterly familiar fashion. After this, we sit down to discuss the situation with Alize, Y'shtola, and Thancred, and our assumptions are as good as confirmed by Thancred in regards to Xenos. We learn his body was definitely interred by the Alamegans, but soon after the burial the grave was defaced, with everyone assuming a vengeful Alamegan to be the culprit. However, the grave was since unchecked, meaning the body could have already gone missing since then. The group's thoughts then turn to Alphino and the danger he now faces. We see him upon the ship heading for Garlemald. He speaks to Maxima about their current destination, and the officer informs him that they currently pass over the burn, with marms and marms of wasteland all around. Maxima goes on to tell the Garlean version of its origin, and how Solos Osgalvus believed icons to be a threat to the star ever since. The ship then suddenly becomes under attack, eventually taking too much damage and crashing in the wasteland. Alphinaud proceeds to assist the injured troops, clearing debris from trapping them and healing those in need. They are suddenly then attacked by the Emperor's personal guard, with the leader giving orders directly from the prince himself. After defeating them, more and more continue to reinforce the guard, and as they prepare to fight again, a nearby group of people also attack the Royal Guard, taking down the Magitech flight units. With the assistance of the strangers, we tackle the remaining troops and begin speaking with the leader of the rescuers. Although the stranger seems unwilling to cooperate, he reveals their intentions by throwing an Ascian mask at Alphinaud's feet, revealing them to be the hunters of the former. After this they turn to leave, offering assistance to the group if they are willing. Alphinaud and Maxima agree, and follow the proclaimed Shadow Hunter further into the wasteland. After some time, Alizé and the Warrior of Light agree to attend an alliance meeting regarding Xenos, and rendezvous with Thancred to hear his information of the Gallian provinces, learning that many attempted unsuccessful rebellions after being spurred on by Doma. We also discover that in the capital, Xenos seems to walk among the peoples without question, finally leading us to practical proof of Ascian involvement. Regarding Alphinaud, however, we discover that no emissary was said to have reached the region, and Thancred at one point received an emergency communication from Alphinaud's link pearl. However, due to interference, he could only make out 2 words the latter spoke: the burn. We return to the Kienkan to see Hien about reaching the wasteland, joining Y'shtola as we do so. Hien tells the same story heard of the burn and how it became barren thanks to excessive summoning in the region. Deciding quickly that an investigation is in order, Yuri suggests we meet atop an overlook near the House of the Fierce with our personal birds. As we arrive, Hien makes ready to leave, advising us not to lose our way of what will be a great lack of civilization, as well as hundreds of miles of empty wastelands.
Make ready, friends! We are come to the burn!
Everyone, land where you can! We must wait out the storm!
As we travel over the vast sands, a storm begins blowing in, forcing an early landing for the group, arriving amidst an area filled with cliffs and covered with the same white sands and unexpected crystals known as the Bleached Shelf. We proceed along a path over a bridge, while the sands shift from the nearby ledges and flow in the wind, amazingly encountering various beasts that somehow make do in the barren landscape. We tackle a pair of Kukulkan and head along a thin path where the rocks fall from above thanks to the storm, fighting another group of beasts and heading down a slope to the next set of cliffs. We find several Luminare, crystalline-like creatures similar to golems. These in particular are made of almost drained crystals from the local area, attacking the group on sight. As we proceed, more rocks begin to fall from the cliffs, but some reveal themselves to be the Desert Desmond, an armadillo-like creature that unfurls and attacks the group. Several more of these drop from above as we fight the other remaining creatures in the area, and after doing so, a nearby rock comes loose and rolls off the cliff out of sight. The party follows it and the momentum carries them over and through an opening into a sheltered area known as the Scorpion's Den, unsurprisingly finding a huge scorpion known as Hedatet guarding it. This creature has large crystals attached to its carapace, used for storing the ether it needs to survive in the harsh environment. As an unfortunate consequence for the group, this also makes the scorpion very dangerous, as it adapts its capabilities to use the crystals as it attacks the group. It uses the crystal needle on its sting to heavily stab the tanking party member, and soon leaps to the centre of the arena. It targets one of the group, showering them with a hail of crystal shards. The only way to avoid this assault is by using the deposits scattered across the den, hiding behind one to mitigate the shards. Thanks to the force from the blast, however, these crystals soon explode when pressured, forcing the targeted member to move away quickly. After this, Hedatet uses Shardfall, and in a similar manner to before, it prepares to burst the entire arena with crystal shards, forcing the pillars to explode in turn. After this, it releases a dissonant screech, causing the vibrations to loosen yet more of the crystals from the ceiling above. When injured, the Scorpion unleashes a hail of shards above, with several each landing on the whole party. After tackling more of its shards and dodging the dissonant sounds, we defeat it and move on to find ourselves in a clearly man-made Imperial mineshaft. As we curve around and past the support structures, we see the glow of what seems to be ancient ruins hove into view. Stepping over the rocky debris, we find ourselves attacked by what clearly appear to be Allagan creations, droids and drones left behind from the days of the Great Civilization. We find our path blocked by an Allagan field, until defeating the nearby dreadnought. We carry on through a broken wall into a much larger shaft known as the Boar. In this tunnel, a swarm of angry Coblin and the Mother Doblin charge at the group, clearly agitated over the disturbance of their nests. The party carries on through to another connected part of the ruin. A final group of the Allagan machines blocks our way through, eventually allowing us to reach the Gamma segregate. We find the defective drone blocking our path here, atop what looks like a platform stop for goods moving across the old facility. As we engage the drone, it unleashes an etherochemical flame by spinning its rear wheel, blasting the party with heat. Soon afterwards, it launches a strategic pool of acid at one of the group, vanishing into the adjacent tunnels as it calls forth auxiliary mining drones. It soon returns with a line of its fellows and prepares to quickly charge at the group. Thankfully, one of the retrieved drones seems to be malfunctioning, allowing the party to stand in front of it to allow the others to skim past without damage. Following this, the large drone continues attacking the party, unleashing a heavy swing on the tanking party member using its etherochemical coil. It then calls forth spinning blades known as rock biters to swipe across the platform, slicing and pushing back any caught in the sweep. When injured, the drone unleashes everything it has left, calling forth both the mining drones as well as the saw blades and additional dreadnoughts, leaving little room for error for the party to evade the dashing and spinning and the flames around the edge of the pathway. After this, we finally manage to take it down, allowing the party to carry on through to the exit of the ruins. We turn the final corner and head up a small hill, finding ourselves in the Blacklands of the Burn. A sweeping view greets us, as we see far into the distance the sand that stretches for miles on end. The creatures that live here still attempt to attack us as we approach, and they are soon joined by the worms that use the sand to their advantage, using it to dive about and cause tremors as the party fight them. After this, we pass through what seems to be the corpse of an absolutely colossal worm, known as the First Worm, perhaps even a progenitor of those that still roam the sands. As we head across the final sweeping plain, we see disturbances in the sands near a last Kukulkan, which on approach emerge as the Stalkers, antlion-like creatures also feverishly dangerous. After avoiding the poisonous spray from these foes, we walk up the final hill to the Aspersory, where a long-forgotten Allagan creation still lingers. On the rounded platform, a white mist begins coalescing, eventually taking form in what is unmistakably a dragon, quite tangible compared to the vapour forming its body. The dragon then roars and prepares to attack. The beast we face here was once a normal variant of its kind, strong and agile, but after being captured by the Allagans, it underwent several experiments involving etherochemistry. Now roaming the burn almost as a ghostly figure, it acts purely on instinct and uses the mist to its advantage. Rime Wreath blasts the party with a freezing wind, and the dragon follows up with a blast of frost breath, leaving behind whirling storms of ice that damage any too close. Afterwards, the dragon spits a great plume of the freezing fog onto a party member, which lands and spreads in all directions with force. In an effort to defend itself, the dragon then begins to vaporize, returning to its mist form while several dragon heads formed from the fog appear. The party must dispel these heads while the dragon slowly builds energy for a cold fog. However, although the dragon still retains enough form to attack, doing so will only return the punishment twofold to any unfortunate enough to do so, freezing them in ice until freed by the group. After dispelling the heads, the dragon re-emerges and continues its sub-zero assault. When injured, it disperses a heavy fog all around the area, vanishing into it. The party here must attempt to find the dragon's location before it flies across the platform, unleashing its breath, again freezing any caught in the blast. After avoiding its bombing runs and mitigating the worst of its slam onto the arena, we manage to fell the beast, where it roars and returns to the same mist it formed from. The group begins looking about the area, spotting the Garlean-made ship in the distance, slightly coated in the blowing sands, quickly deducing that it must have been the ship bearing Alphino. Y'shtola has a look around and spots a broken war machina, noting that there must have been a struggle after the crash. After searching for a while and finding no sign of the crew or Alphino, Yugiri spots a particular soldier wearing the royal insignia, marking him as one of the Emperor's personal guard. Worried, Alizé is concerned that Alphino may now be a prisoner of the Emperor, but the Warrior of Light and Hien reassure her, reminding her that Alphino is quite capable on his own. The group decides to return to Doma to discuss their options as Alizé gazes out over the wastes, clearly still worried about her brother. Returning to the Doman Enclave, Hien requests our attendance in a meeting with a foreign dignitary, who turns out to be Lys. After explaining the situation regarding Alphino, she tells us that the Alliance wish to have Hien at the arranged meeting of the Five Nations, to which Hien agrees. After this, Lys requests a private word with the Warrior of Light on the docks, and she wonders about Alizé's condition. Although she normally seems reckless and eager for action, the whereabouts of Alphino weigh heavily on her mind. But the Warrior of Light reassures Lys that they will be there for Alizé until we find Alphino. Following this, we return to the Kienkan to discuss the ways to shore up Doma's defences, in case of yet another assault from Garlemald. After Hien proposes the surprising idea of forming his own alliance in the east, with the peoples of Suino Sato and Hingashi, as well as the further nations of Nangxia and Dalmasca, Alizé worries that even should the plan work, they would need a way to delay the Guardians should they choose to invade with a fleet of airships. Y'shtola seems to have an idea, however. Remembering the burn, she recalls the great Allagan ruins the group passed through there, and how the etheric signature coursing through them seemed highly similar, if not identical to the one seen in the floating continent of Azizlar. This lends credence to the idea that the burn was formed, not by the excess summoning of primals, but by the harvesting and stemming of the flow of the ether there, causing the Allagan facility to ascend to the skies, while leaving what remained as the wasteland we now know. Following her suggestions, the group agrees to find a way to use the Allagan field generators seen within the area to create a barrier to force the fuel-starved airships to reroute, and likely be made to land, prompting a visit to the Azim Step from Hien to find a viable energy source. And that's the end of the story and lore of the Burn. A wasteland long thought to be the cause of the primal threat that spurs Garlean citizens and soldiers alike to their long-held beliefs, that instead seems to actually be the origin of the now floating continent housing some of the Allagan's greatest and most terrible creations. With Alphino still missing, the group grows more desperate to find his whereabouts, but for now can only assist Doma with the efforts in preventing another invasion from the foes to the north. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy XIV, and I'll see you next time for the hard mode version of Saint Moshian's Arboretum.